Okay guys, welcome. Today I'm about to go outside and shoot some sample photos for you while explaining my workflow, my photography workflow using my handphone. But in order for you to understand what is happening, okay, you need to know that I'm going to be shooting exclusively on a mounted stand on a tripod. And this would be the tripod in question. All right, so this is the tripod stand that I was talking about. Essentially, it is just a light stand, all right? And to give you a pricing of the affordability of the light stand's only about $20 or $25, depending on where you buy it from. And then on the top of the light stand, I have a ball head. This is called a ball head, this thing here, all right? And you can buy that locally from a shop near Kalawai Road for 15 ringgit. This whole device here is about 12 ringgit. So let's do the math. 15, 12 plus 25. Less than 100 ringgit, and you have yourself a multifaceted tool that you can use to help with your productions, with your miking, with your videos, with, well, basically a lot of things. All right. One of the best things that you can do and you can purchase before your tripod. And stay tuned because we are going to do some outdoor photography and hopefully it'll help you. All right, so now the phone is on the stand and it is set at eye level. I'm using the ball head to adjust the horizon right now. Okay, horizon is the horizontal level. And as you can tell, it is a very, very cool and functional device for you to do podcasting, whatever you call it, vlogging. Yeah. And most importantly, it's also one of the coolest ways and the cheapest ways to actually get moving shots, because now the light stand acts as a gimbal. Forget your stabilizer, forget all your other nonsense. It's not really necessary. All you need is to have a light stand, know where to hold the light stand, right, at the fulcrum point, and walk around with it. So as you can tell, yeah, footage is pretty stable. And all that is done cheaply, okay? For those of you who think that you need a gimbal to get a stabilized shot, I need you to think again. What you need to do is to understand the physics of stabilization, and you can literally make your own stabilizer. I know I've told you this many times before, over and over again, but yeah, only buy stuff that you know you cannot make, number one. Number two, that you know that you need and it justifies the cost. There's no point buying a $5,000 gimbal if you charge your customers 300 ringgit. Okay, know your worth in the marketplace and then invest in your equipment accordingly. If you are worth $1 million per movie, yeah, get $1 million worth of equipment. But if you're charging 300 bucks, learn how to use all these hacks, all these cheats, learn how to light yourself properly. Just by turning around, getting the light in front of my face, it looks much better. All right? If I do it this way, yeah, slightly different. Look at the shadows. If I turn it back this way, yes, much nicer. All right? So I'm walking around, there's a stabilizer, I'm getting a shot. I just kick the stand, hence the jiggle. But I think you get the message, okay? Now, in order for you to understand how this is working, if you look at the TV set, you'll be able to see what I'm doing. All right? Nothing fancy, but very effective. And then when you get tired, put the stand down on the ground, take a step back, and then continue with your show. Okay? KDU is virtually empty today, but it doesn't mean that I cannot help you learn some stuff. So today, probably after lunch, I'm going to walk around KDU with this device and explain to you how I get certain shots, how I expose those shots, and how I do bracketing. Okay? So stay tuned. Adios. Okay, guys. Just to give you an indication of what's happening right now, I have the camera on the stand and I'm plugged in with a headset. What I'm going to do now is walk around and get some photographs. Unfortunately, I'm going to need to lock the lab before I go on. All right. Now this is essentially going to be a lesson in photography, not videography, all right? But the principles that we are going to do is essentially the same. All right, so this will be one shot which may pose a problem for you. Okay, I'm going to change the camera to Pro mode, and straight away you can see that we have problems. It's a bit too dark. So the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, what quality of image do I want? And hang on. And straight away, the quality that I want would be ISO 100. I want the best quality possible. I want my shutter speed to be, well, basically I can go to any shutter speed I want because I am now putting the camera on a tripod. I'm not too concerned about shake. Secondly, there is no moving elements in my frame. All right, so I can use a slow shutter speed. But if someone is walking and there's movement, I am going to need to lock my shutter speed to 125 over a second. So in this scenario, I am going to set my shutter speed to, let me see, maybe about, let's go to 125. Let's follow the basic principles. I'm now going to change my ISO, and my ISO will go up to approximately, let's see how much it works. 1250, anything higher, 3002. Right, so straight away, we can tell that this is going to be a problem. There's not enough light. Okay, so how do we fix this? Well, for one thing, like I said, I want the best quality, so ISO goes back down to 100. My shutter speed is going to be as low as I need to bring the image, the brightness up. All right, now straight away, I am liking that exposure. Now, how to tell if the exposure is different, is adequate? All right, so the answer is very straightforward. You need to look at the brightest part of the image in relation to the darkest part of the image. And right now, the brightest part of the image is right at the back. Right at the back. All right, I'm trying to digitally zoom in, which is not something I would recommend. But I just want to show you the brightest part of the image, and that is the brightest part over there on the top left hand corner. Okay, now if I were to change my shutter speed, I could darken it. See that? See how dark it gets right now? Right, so this would be the perfect exposure for that part of the corridor. Okay, unfortunately it just screws up everything else. So I now need to make a creative decision. I need to ask myself, what is the most important image or part of the image that I want to capture? And the answer is, I want to capture the foreground element, which is basically this corridor in front. Okay, and there you have it, a photograph that is slightly underexposed. Okay, let me just push it maybe slightly brighter, something like that. Yeah. That would make a very good photograph. Now, if you notice, I'm also shooting this in manual mode. And the reason for that is because I want to shoot multiple shots without having to think about the subsequent settings. Okay. Also, if you notice on the screen on the top left-hand corner, I have the RAW setting is on. So this photograph is going to be captured in RAW mode, and it will allow me to be able to adjust it accordingly. All right, so let's take a photograph, shall we? Here we go. Stabilize the camera, press the shutter button, and we now have a photo. Let's have a look at that. All right, it's a little bit blurred right now because the camera is processing the raw image. Okay, it looks not bad. It looks pretty good. It's a little bit dark. Okay, I will brighten it up just a little bit more. And yeah, I'm going to use that shot. Now, if you notice, my ISO is locked at 100. Again, like I said, my priority is the quality of the shot. So the ISO, well, I'm choosing 100. That's a creative decision that I'm making. All right, taking the second photo. And boom. Let's have a look at it. Yes, much better. We still have highlights, we still have some shots there, and I am good. Okay. Now let's move on to another photograph. Something that has a slightly different perspective.
Wow, that's it.
All right, so this shot over here is actually a rather complex shot. Okay, so I'm going to block this off so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to bring my shutter speed to 1:5 because that will be the standard that I want. My ISO is locked at 100. My lens is ultra wide because I want a wide angle shot. I'm setting my horizon. I'm setting my framing. Now I have a choice to make. Do I want to play with the shutter or do I want to play with the ISO? You know what? I'm going to play with a little bit of everything. I want it to be crystal clear, crystal sharp. I do not want any blur. All right, and the blurring that I'm referring to is with regards to the shutter speed. So my shutter speed, I'm going to leave it at 1:5. I'm going to change my ISO and bump it up just a little bit to get the brightness that I want. I like that. If you look on the top left-hand corner over there where I'm touching right now, that is a little bit overexposed. I'm okay with that. And if you look on the right-hand side over here where I'm touching now, that is actually underexposed. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the dynamic range of your camera. The ability to record the brightest of image and the darkest of the image. Okay? Your job is for creative control. How do we adjust it accordingly? Now, I want to find somewhere in the middle. I want to see a little bit of the staircase and I want to burn the whites just a little bit. Something like that. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, looks like a half decent shot which I can save. Now once again, I'm using RAW, which means in post-production I'll be able to make this photo pop very nicely. Pressing the shutter button, taking a shot, boom. Let's have a look. Nice, look at that. Very, very nice, very polished, very professional looking. Okay, now the best part is the settings have not changed. So I could lift the camera. I could go somewhere else like this, okay, and just press the shutter button. I do not have to rethink of a lot of issues, okay. Maybe I can go and do a reverse angle like this, shoot the staircase, okay, and stabilize the camera, take a photograph, boom. All right, which brings us to the next question. When do you change your settings? All right. Look, I'm even going to look over the banister if I can. Okay. Maybe I'll send the camera a little bit higher up. Yeah, something like that. I'll adjust the horizon again, something like that. Okay, so question, when do I change the settings? Well, the answer is actually dependent on your eye. I'm looking at the darkest areas and I'm looking at the brightest areas right now. And I see coverage. I see that the whites are being captured in terms of texture. By the way, guys, we're looking at texture right now, yeah? We're not looking at color, huh? We're looking at brightness and we're looking at texture. So if we look at this part where I'm touching right now, that's the brightest part of the image for me. And let's look at the darkest part of the image, which may be over here. Oh no, I just touched the stupid setting. Again, like I said, this is why handphones don't make very good cameras. You have to touch the screen. I don't really like that. Okay? Or maybe this part here of the screen. Okay. Okay. Unfortunately, I inadvertently turned off the recording. I guess you can tell I don't like handphones. I do not like working with my handphones. It is just slow, cumbersome, and a pain in the rear end. All right, let's go back again. Let's reset everything. Lens is ultra wide. Exposure, I'll leave it at 320. Shutter, I'll leave it at 125 because that's what I want. White balance is on daylight because I'm going to shoot mostly in this environment. I'm going to ask myself, is this too bright or too dark? I'm going to play with the ISO to give me what I want. If you go down to this point, you can see that the shadows are way, way too dark. I do not want that. If I go higher, I get detail in the shadows, but have I lost the highlights? I think it's still good. Let me go a little bit higher now. Now, that's way, way too much. By the way, guys, you know in some cameras there you will see a histogram. Yeah, so the function of the histogram is to tell me whether I have too much highlights or too dark, all right? That takes out the guessing of the frame. But right now I'm applying some basic common sense and telling you that this looks pretty decent to me. So I'm going to take a shot and I'm going to have a look. So let's stabilize the camera, take a deep breath, and then gently touch the screen. Boom. Awesome. Let's have a look and see what we got. Very nice. Very even. Pretty darn good. All right. Let's go back and take some other additional stabilized footage. I am going to walk with this light stand. I'm using it like a gimbal right now. If you think that it is stable and you like it, yeah, it is stable. Okay, keep moving. All right, so I'm going to give you an example of what kind of photograph boggles the memory, what kind of photograph screws up the camera. You jadi star mah, saya buat video. Right, so this is a kind of photograph that will basically screw up everything for you. Okay, this is what we call this is a backlit photo. All right, and I now need to make a choice. What is the exposure that I want to use? All right, so let's work out the numbers. Shutter speed is 125. I don't want to shake, so I'm going to leave it at 125. ISO, I'm going to go all the way down to 100 because I think there's a lot of light. And let's have a look. Ta-da! All right, so this setting is pretty good. It has exposed for the friendly security guard, but unfortunately the background is totally gone. So let's try and get the background exposed properly. Now if you look carefully, I can't play anymore with the ISO. The ISO is locked at 100. So the only other thing that I can do right now is touch the shutter speed. So I want to change the shutter speed to something higher. All right. Now look at that. Look at that. Okay. The shutter speed now is, I think, 2000. Look at the background. The background is exposed. How do we find the middle ground? Well, it's pretty easy. Just now it was 125. That was the good exposure for the foreground. This is the good exposure for the background. Therefore, it makes common sense for us to go somewhere in between, like that. Yeah. All right. That, ladies and gentlemen, would be about the middle ground, the middle portion of the shot. And because we are shooting in RAW mode, I am pretty sure that we'll be able to save this as well. Let's try this out. Hang on. All right, I'm happy with that. Here we go. Stabilize the shot. 1, 2, 3, boom. Another one. 1, 2, 3, boom. Okay. All right, so this is the single shot challenge. I am trying to get the perfect exposure with just one shot. Now, there are other ways to get very good exposure, and that is to use HDR techniques. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and I'm going to show you now how to do HDR. Unfortunately, HDR will require you to shoot twice, one for the foreground and one for the background. So let's go find something else to shoot that has a foreground and a background. Uh, uh, Very good question. I have no idea what I want to shoot. Okay, let me shoot this. Okay. Okay. So I'm now going to make a conscious decision to expose twice. One for the foreground and one for the background. This is the foreground. The foreground is right in front. All right, so I'm going to push the exposure up. You need to lock everything down, make sure the tripod is rock solid. Okay. All right, I'm exposing for the foreground. This looks good. Take a photo. All right, there's someone walking, we'll let him go past. Again, like I said, we're going to chop him up later and use that image for the background later. Okay, expose, doom. You can see on the right hand side, we have the handsome security guard standing over here. So this shot will illuminate him as well. Now, I am going to change my shutter speed and I'm going to set the exposure for the background. Boss. Pinjam Sat, you might sini Sat. Okay, now notice I asked him to move because I want to get the background shot, the background plane. Okay, so I'm going to take a shot now of the background. So let's look at the two photos again. All right, this is the background. This is the foreground. Background, foreground. All right. So what we're going to do in post-production later is we are actually going to merge these two photographs. And hold on now. Right, so we're going to merge these two photographs and basically try to get a high dynamic range shot that we can use. Now hold on. Now this principle also applies to video. Okay, the thing is, you need to start thinking in terms of planes. Okay, background plane, foreground plane, and the mid-tone plane. Okay. I was thinking very hard on how to explain this to you, but I think the easiest method would be to use photographs and photography as a starting point for video. Okay. All right, so there's another photograph here which is very nice, a nice angle. I'm going to try and take this shot. I'm going to show it to you in a while. Okay, I'm going to change the angle here. Okay, I'm going to set the camera to ultra wide. Okay, and all right. So as you can see from the photograph, let me just set this to a slow shutter speed. You can see that we have a few problems. Problem number one is the highlight area, all right, which is the photograph of the ceiling, that curved, transparent sunlight thingy. And we also have very dark areas underneath. Okay. All right, so let's try and do this with one shot. Let's try to find a middle exposure. We're going to have to let the sky burn a bit, no problem. And we need to get the middle area, the shadow areas lit as well. Yeah, I like that. That looks pretty good to me. All right, so I'm shooting this in RAW mode. Here we go. I'm going to take one photograph. Let's have a look at that. There you go. Very nice, very even, very balanced. Okay. Now, we are going to enhance this further in Photoshop slightly later on, but for a start, that's a very good starting point. Now, how do we take a two-shot HDR mode? Again, like I said, we have to ask ourselves two questions. Question number one, I need an exposure for the highlight, so I'm going to go and darken it. All right. Now this photograph is basically for the white areas, the ceiling, the green, and highlight areas. Even the area in the background, I want to take a bit. All right, all right. I'm happy with that. Taking a shot now. Okay, now I'm going to expose for the shadow areas, the darker areas, which is something like that. All right, taking a shot now. All right, let's have a look. All right, so this is the shadow areas, this is the highlight area, and this is the mid-tone area or the central point. Now, for many people, this photograph alone would be very, very adequate and usable. But I'm a little bit more fussy. I want to see more detail in key areas, for example, in the background. All right. I want that area to be more visible. I want the poster on the wall to be more visible. All right. I want to have control. So this is what we're going to do, and this is what the control is for. We shoot 2 or 3 shots. Okay. Some gorgeous lecturers walking by. I'm not going to shoot them, so that's fine. Let's go see where else we can shoot something that is problematic. All right, so let's see. Problematic areas. All right, I have a problematic area right now, and that is a problematic area right there. Okay, so I'm shooting in portrait mode, and as you can tell, we have a problem. If I expose for the sky, that's the look that we are going to get. If I expose for the shadow area, the sky totally disappears. If I try to find a middle ground, it will probably be something like that, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that looks all right. Okay, taking a shot for raw mode. Boom. Okay, now let's do the HDR version. I'm going to take one shot for the sky. I'm going to expose for the sky, or rather the highlights. That's one. Then I'm going to take one for the shadow areas and stabilize the camera. And that's 2. Awesome. Okay. Very, very, very nice. All right. So in a nutshell, to get the best exposure all the time, you as a photographer, your responsibility. Hang on, let me just shorten the legs. Okay. Your responsibility as a photographer is to not only make sure that you have the right framing and the right positioning of the camera, but you are also responsible for making sure that you capture all the detail and texture within that photograph. And you will notice that we don't worry so much about color. Our biggest concern is about lighting, the amount of light. And the reason is actually pretty straightforward. If you overexpose, air conditioning, yeah. If you all right. If you overexpose a photograph, the parts that are overexposed, the parts that are white, will be white. There will be no texture, there will be no details in that area as well. And the same is true for the underexposed areas, for the black areas. In fact, if you look behind me right now, if you look in that area right there, that's pitch black. I'm pretty sure there's no data in there at all. Okay? And is that wrong? No, it's not. What is wrong is that we assume as photographers that that's the way it is. That's wrong. Okay? As photographers, we need to make a creative decision. We need to take control of this environment. We need to ask ourselves, do I want that? Do I want that? Do I want that? That's what being a professional is, making decisions for your customers. Now, if you shoot something like this and I think it's beautiful, and then you show the customer, and the customer says, I don't like that, dude. I want that to be seen. I want that to be focused. I want. And if you didn't shoot RAW, if you didn't shoot backup plans, if you didn't shoot HDR, if you didn't shoot different exposures or brackets, you need to come back and shoot all over again. In other words, if you charge the customer $300, you just lost money. Remember, money. We are learning this, we are doing this to earn a living. We're not doing this for fun. All right. So, with that said, this is going to be a slightly longer tutorial because I've got quite a fair bit of photographs to go through. But hopefully together, that photo editing session with this shooting session, we should be able to get a decent understanding of how to go about it. It's 12 o'clock. I'm going to go have my lunch. When I come back, we'll proceed with the second part of the edit, and then I'll post it slightly later in the day. See you later. Okay, guys, I'm back from lunch. Hope you guys have had a good lunch as well. So now I've copied all the files out into Photoshop, and we are going to start processing the images. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start processing the raw images. So I'm going to click open, and I don't know if you guys realize this, but you can literally select, press shift, and you can actually open many images at one time. And what's going to happen here is that on the left hand side you are going to see a film strip of all of the raw files listed out for you in full glory. Okay, now when working in this environment and in this layout, you will also realize that this looks very much like Lightroom. In fact, it has very similar capabilities as Lightroom. So when people keep telling me that Lightroom is the cat's whiskers, I tell them, why pay money? Just download the Adobe RAW plugin and use it. And you can do basically everything that Lightroom can. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm opening all of these up is because I know for a fact that I do not want to bracket the DNG photos. I want to select the photo that is perfect for my application. Okay, so let's start off with the first one, which is on the left hand side. I've got this one which is slightly darker, and I've got this one which is slightly brighter. All right, so I'm making a creative choice right now. The brighter image has something called bloom. If you look at the photo on the inside here, you will see that there is a little bit of camera shake and a lot of blooming happening. Okay, straight away, like I told you, blur shots we throw away. We don't want it, so that's not what we want. Instead, I'm going to take the darker one, and I am going to start affecting some changes. Now, because I shot this pretty well, I literally don't have much work to do. Okay, I don't have to play with the exposure that much. It looks pretty good to me. I can increase the contrast a bit if I want. I can bring the highlights down. All right. If you look at the flare of the light bulbs over here, all right, you can see that the highlight slider affects the amount of highlights over there. Okay. You can also drop the shadows to make it a little bit more contrasty. You can bump the shadows as well. The opportunities are endless. Okay. Now, like I said, if you really want to see whether you've got detail in all of the areas, just drop the saturation slider and then continue the processing in black and white. This will tell you very much whether you have details in the shadows. Now, if you look carefully at the shadow slider, if you look at this wall here, this cabinet here, it will affect the detail of that area. Now, the question here is, do you want to see detail in that area, or is it not necessary? All right, you don't want to do a change to one area and totally spoil the other areas. Okay, you want to make a value judgment call. Now, I think I'm going to make it a little bit darker this way, and I'm happy with that. I can also drop the blacks if I want, bump up the blacks if I want.
the opportunities are all there for you. Now I'm going to bring the saturation back up to 0. You can double click this, click 0, and then reduce the saturation, bump up the saturation, push the clarity a wee bit, push the vibrance a wee bit. All right, and there you have it. You have something pretty cool already. All right, notice I'm not touching the white balance at all because we did it correct. It was set to daylight. Okay, if your white balance was set to auto, then each of these photographs would be different and you would have a problem. All right, you won't be able to deliver to your customer a standardized set of photographs. You'd have to retouch forever. Okay, so the good thing is now this is done. These changes are all saved to your DNG file. Okay, you can open it up in Photoshop if you want and continue touching up, do some retouching. I don't want to proceed any further because I just want to explain the raw processing to you. This is the second photograph. If you look carefully, this one, the whites here are a little bit burnt, a little bit washed out. So is this one. And so is this one. Now, to truly see whether it is washed out or not, again, like I said, drop the saturation down and then bring the highlight slider all the way to the left. All right. You can even drop the exposure. Look at the wall. Can you see the details in the wall? All right, let me show you. See this area here? Right. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a texture. That means that there is something there, which is why the raw format is beautiful. Okay, let's bring up saturation again. All right. Now I'm going to keep the highlight slider down. I am going to bump up the shadows a wee bit. I am going to push up exposure a wee bit. And there you have it. A very nicely balanced photograph with details in the highlight areas and details in the shadow areas. Okay. Now if you zoom in, you will also notice that we have a bit of noise. Okay. Now the reason for the noise is of course because we were shooting in an exaggerated mode, if I'm not mistaken. I think our ISO, our shutter speed was quite high, and our ISO was, I don't know what ISO this is, let me check. ISO for this one was 320, if you look at the right hand side here. And anytime you push your ISO higher than 100, you are going to get a little bit of noise. All right, so don't be too concerned about it. Noise is not wrong, but too much noise can be a problem. Okay, so I'm reducing sharpness. I do not want to tamper with that. I'm happy with the amount of noise reduction there. It has softened the image somewhat. So maybe I am going to just bump up the contrast a little bit and bump up the shadows just a little bit more. All right, and that is a very, very usable, even photograph. Okay, the second one is also not bad. Just to double check, let's see if I bring the exposure down. Yes, we also have details in the highlight, so you can retouch this and save it up. This one, where is the highlight? The highlight will be that wall over there. Let's bring the exposure down just to check. Yes, we have details. Very good. Okay. This one. Look at the highlights over here, this white area. Let's double check. Bring the exposure down. Yes, we have details as well. Okay, highlights, push it up. Shadows, push it up a bit. Very good. Very nice. Bump up the clarity just a wee bit. Oh, reds are changing color. All right. There you go. All right, we even have the raw version of this file, okay, which we shot earlier. All right, and the reason why I shot this like that is because I wanted to show you the power of RAW, or basically the dynamic range of RAW. So let's drop the exposure and see if we can save the highlight areas. Just look at that. One file and all the color information is still there. All the textural information is still there. Look at that. All right. Now I'm going to bump up the shadows. This handsome gentleman over here with the big stomach is in the shadow area now. So let's up his value. There you go. He's getting brighter. Drop the highlights a bit. Play out the exposure a bit. Find the middle ground. Drop your saturation a bit. There's definitely some noise, but don't worry about it. Beautiful. Okay, that's nice. Look at that. I don't even have to use HDR to get a decent photograph in this environment. All right. What is the big issue here is the shutter speed. Look at the shutter speed over there. It has dropped below the 125 mark, which means that I could not get this shot handheld. Okay, so again, this proves a very important theory that I keep asking you, reminding you guys. That is, get a good tripod. Okay, with a good tripod, you can play with extreme shutter speeds and you can literally shoot in any environment in RAW mode. And like I said, yeah, it will save your workflow. Let's look at these three now. This one is quite evenly exposed. This would be I think the middle photograph. This one is the one that was exposed for the sky, and this one was exposed for the shadow areas. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the middle one and I'm going to try and drop down the exposure so I can see the sky. Beautiful. Look at that. Look at that. Look at the texture in the skylight. It's still there. RAW is fantastic. My phone just became a professional camera. All right. Okay, I'm getting textures there. I'm now going to bring up the shadows. Okay. I'm going to get some middle ground over there. I'm going to push up some clarity, maybe a bit of vibrance. Do I want to reduce the whites? Now I'll bump up the whites. Look at that. Look at how it's popping right now. I'm going to add a bit of noise reduction. Don't really need it, but why not? You can sharpen it a bit more. Look at that. Look at that photo. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. One photograph shot in RAW and my work is done. Okay, I don't even need the other photographs anymore. I'm just going to keep this one and use it for my production. Same thing for this last photo. This one was exposed for the shadow areas at the bottom. This one was exposed for the sky. This one was my attempt at, actually I don't even know what this is for. It looks really, really burnt. Let's try and bring this back. This is an extreme case scenario. Let's try and drop the exposure for this one. Well, what do you know? You still can. Look at that. Look at that. It still is a usable photograph. Now imagine if I had a really decently shot one, like this one. All right, let's drop the exposure. Look at the sky. Look at the details and the textures in the patterns in the sky. Increasing the highlights, reducing the contrast maybe, up the clarity a bit. I'm going to bring the highlights down. Let's work on the opposite way. Bring the highlights down and up the exposure. Look at that. Look at that. I got detail there, I got detail here, and I got detail here. Straight away, that looks like a HDR photo to me. All right. Fantastic. Absolutely beautiful. I am happy. Once again, it has proven my case. You always want to shoot in RAW because it will give you the best results. Now, what if your phone or your camera cannot shoot in RAW? So here comes the problem. The problem is you now need to use your JPEGs and you need to try and save it. So I'm going to open up these two files here. And these two files are the similar copies of the RAW file, but they are in JPEG format. Now remember that when you set your camera and your phone to shoot in RAW, the device also shoots a copy in JPEG. So you have one in RAW, one in JPEG. The reason for that is because you want to be able to have a backup. If the RAW gets corrupted, if the RAW file gets corrupted, you have the JPEG file. So let's do this in JPEG, shall we? Let us go to Image, we go to Adjustments, we go to Shadow and Highlights, and we play with the shadow and highlights. Now, straight away you can see that JPEG just can't help you out. All right, JPEG has its limits. It's not bad, but JPEG has some limitations. Let's use Ctrl L to bring in the levels to pump up the brightness a bit. Yeah, you can see it's not bad, but there is definitely some artifacting, and this is artifacting. A-R-T-I-F-A-C-T-I-N-G. You see these little square blocks over here? See this? See those square blocks? All this noise, this artifacts. This is not grain, ladies and gentlemen. This is JPEG compression at work. This is the reason why we don't use JPEGs. We don't edit photos in JPEGs. We just create JPEGs to distribute to websites and give it to our customers. All right? If a customer decides that they want to retouch a JPEG, I would literally advise them not to do it, and I would give them the raw file. Okay? But yeah, if you had, or if you didn't have, you could still use this. Okay? Let's look at the security guard photo. Yeah, all right, so this is the security guard photograph right here. Sorry, this is not the one. I'm on the one where he's looking at me. Yeah, that one. Okay, so this is the security guard photo. When we were using the raw file, we could pull the highlights down. So let's try and pull the highlights back. And yeah, not working. Let's try another tool. Adjustment, shadow and highlights. Let us bring up the highlights. Yeah, still not working. Look at this area here. That is already gone. That is already burnt. There is no information there. No matter what we do, the information is gone. But, with a big but, it still is an agreeable photograph. We can still see our machan over here. We can still see some textures in the background, and yeah, it works. You decide which one is better, the RAW file or the JPEG file. By the way, guys, I'm going to put all of these photographs inside a folder, and I'm going to share the link in the description area if you want to download these RAW files and these JPEGs to go and play with. They will be there for a week. After a week, I will delete them because my Google Drive space is running out. Alright, so before we stop, let's look at something else. Let's look at the 3 photos here. Now, these are very good examples of time and care in executing a photograph. We took time and care to find the proper exposure. We analyze the shots. This one, again, like I said, shadow area here. This one, what is this one? Let me see. Yeah. This one would be the exposure of the top here, and this one is the flat and general area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the middle one, which is this one. I'm going to apply a Ctrl L. Again, look at the histogram, nice and even throughout. That means we did our job correctly. And I'm just going to move the gray. Look at that. Just sliding the center bit instantly gives me a half decent photograph. Okay, happy with that. How about the dark one? Let's try the dark one. This is the darker version. Look at the histogram again. It's more on the left hand side, which tells us that the image is slightly darker. Can I bump it up? Yes, I can. But look at the noise. Look at the noise and all the shadow and the darker areas. All right? It is not flattering at all. Straight away, I don't want to use that. That is, in fact, I'm not happy with that at all. I'm just going to delete it. There you go. Let's try it with this one. Histogram is not bad. See whether we can bring it back. Yeah. Impressive. Not bad at all. How about this one? Ctrl L. Let's try this out. Yes, very nice. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to end it here for today with some key pointers. Okay. And pointer number one, there is a workflow to how you want to shoot a photograph. And this is the workflow. First, frame your shot. All right. Put your tripod there, put the camera there, find the framing that you want, and then lock your focus. All right. When I say lock your focus means turn your lens, make sure it's focusing on the area that you want, and then lock it down. Now, if you're using a DSLR, you may accidentally click the ring and the focus will be misaligned. So what I do is I walk around with a little bit of blue tack in my bag, and I use a little bit of blue tack to lock the lens ring in place. All right. Now, once I know that my focusing is spot on, my framing is spot on, then I need to ask myself, what are the 3 criteria that I want to do? Is there motion in the shot? Is someone jumping up and down? Is someone running left and right? If that's the case, then the shutter speed is most important. Okay? If you don't have the right shutter speed, that person will be a blur. In this case, there was no one walking. I wanted quality. I didn't care about motion. So in this photo, my ISO was a criteria. I locked my ISO at 100, and then I changed my shutter speed and aperture to match. All right. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. You just need to find the exposure for the middle gray areas. Okay, this would be the whites, the highlights. This would be the shadows. The gray areas are those in between these 2 tones. So learn to expose for the gray areas. Now, what if you don't know how to do this or you don't have time? Then the answer is very simple. Shoot in RAW, take 3 photos. The first photo you expose for the highlights, second photo you expose for the shadows, and the third photo you expose for the gray area. And finally, the most important rule of all, please use a tripod. If you don't have a tripod, you will not be able to do this. All right, and this is a composition. So I have 2 photos here. I am going to drag this photo and I'm going to bring it into the top layer. And straight away you can see that there are 2 layers here. All right. Right. So now I'm going to move my layer and it's going to automatically lock itself on top. Now if you go to the top of the layer tab over here, you will see an opacity slider. And if you slide it down, you can see whether or not the photos are aligned. And straight away, we have a problem. Look at that. The photos are not aligned. It moved. Why did it move? Yeah, because I was using a lousy tripod. Like I said, a light stand is an emergency measure. If you want to get really good photos, you're going to need to get a decent photo tripod. Now, in this case, I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to manually align the images until they are more or less lined up. I'm using the cursor keys right now, up, down, left, right, to get it more or less in the right position. All right, there we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, if you look at the photos, yeah, that's pretty all right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask myself, what are the strengths of each photo and what do I need? Okay, so from layer 1, the strengths of layer 1 is this square area here. I want this square area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection tool. By the way, you should know your selection tools by now. Choose one. I'm going to use the quick selection tool and I'm just going to select the general vicinity. All right. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay. I am also now going to feather it. You can right click and feather. I'm going to go for 5 pixels. And then I'm going to Control J. All right, so let's look at the layers again. I've got that area. I've got this layer and I've got the back layer, the original layer that I like. I'm now going to put the layer that I selected and I'm going to stick it on top. And now I can adjust that area alone. I can choose to highlight it, I can choose to low light it, I can choose to do whatever I want. All right, that looks pretty decent, looks nicer. What you do not want to do is move the layer. You do that, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to bring it back. Okay, remember Control Z is there for you. Shift Control Z if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, sorry, Alt Control Z. That steps backwards 99 times. You can go back 99 times to fix 99 mistakes. So don't worry about what you are doing. Just do it and then play with it. Okay, so that is that. How about the ceiling? Yeah, I want this to be a little bit darker, but I don't want to adjust everything else. So I'm going to go to the background layer. I am going to Magic Wand again. This time I'm going to select the whole area. Notice that it's not doing a very good job with the selection, and that is all right. You need to try first and see whether it works. If it doesn't work, you may need to use another selection method. You could use the pen tool, you could use the magnetic lasso tool. The choice is up to you. I'm happy with that. That's not a very bad thing. All right, I'm going to press Ctrl J. See that? And then I'm going to open up the two layers that I want. I'm going to press Ctrl L and I'm going to darken it. Boo-boo. That's not nice at all. Now again, like I said, this is a JPEG file, so there's no real way to pull this out. If I really wanted to save this, I'd have to open up the DNG, extract it, blah, 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 blah. Hopefully, you have understood what I have just described to you. If you didn't, I recommend you go through this video again and try to understand the underlying concept behind compositing. This, ladies and gentlemen, is compositing. We are creating a new image from pieces of another image. And we're going to do it in such a way that your customer will not know. Okay? In fact, if you take this and show this to a user of a 5D Mark II, a really high-end camera, they will be amazed because this shot clearly cannot come out of a camera natively. Even in RAW or in DNG format, the amount of retouching that we are doing is really, really substantial. Okay? Now, look at the photo from slightly further back. Look at the amount of control that we have. See how much I'm brightening the dark area? Look at that. It's as though I placed a flash inside that area and illuminated that area. Things are just popping like nobody's business, left, right, and center. I can even Control U this and change the hue. I can even increase the saturation. I can even make it darker. I can do all sorts of stuff. Of course, that looks horrible as hell, but yeah, I think you get the message. All right. I can even do a magnetic lasso selection here like this. I click. Sorry, I'll use a polygonal. I'm using polygonal because I'm only selecting straight lines like this. See that? Control J. Okay. And I am going to Control L. And look, I am brightening that portion of the image. All right. Let's say I want this yellow thing here. Look at that. I want this yellow thing. What selection tool should I use? I'm going to use the quick selection tool. Let's give it a shot, shall we? All right. It seems to be struggling a wee bit. Yep, it's struggling. So in this case, because it's struggling, I would have to use the pen tool and go in and draw it manually. All right, guys. All right, so this is a long video, but this would be the absolute last video in this series with regards to getting a good photograph. Now, the subsequent episodes will be designed to show you how to operate Photoshop within the specifications of Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and all the other software that you're using. Right now, a lot of you are assuming that Photoshop works on its own. It creates good photographs, and then you take the photo and then you put it into InDesign or Illustrator. Actually, it's a little bit more than that. You need to pay attention to certain rules and specifications, which we will talk of in the next video. But until then, enjoy, download these photos, go play with it, show me what you have done if you want, and I will give you a nice critique. Thank you and adios.